Just bear with us as we bring the mayor into the meeting. Thank you.
So we're ready to go? So you should all feel very relaxed, as the mayor has already blown it at the beginning of the meeting. So I'll read the invocation. As we come together today, recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness, where freedom prevails and justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us, so that we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. If you are here, I tell you to be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councillor Vanderstelt?
Present.
Councillor Weaver?
Present.
Councillor Sless?
Present.
Councillor Utley?
Present.
Councillor Martin?
Present.
Councillor McCreary?
Here.
Councillor Antosky?
Here.
Councillor Carpenter?
Here.
Councillor Van Tilborg?
Here.
Councillor Wall?
Present.
And Mayor Davis?
Opportunity to make some brief comments. It's been almost, I think, 4 weeks since we had our last meeting, and I welcome the councillors that were unable to attend our last meeting. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. Hence our first ever virtual council meeting tonight. We come together tonight to consider the city's urgent business and to reassure our citizens that we're doing everything in our power to protect the health, safety, and well-being of our essential frontline workers, residents, city staff, and volunteers during this public health crisis. That effort is a relentless commitment on the part of the city and its partners to do what we must to protect our residents. And those partners include Brantford Police Services, Brant County Health Unit, the OPP, Dr. Banke, the Medical Officer of Health, Brant Community Healthcare System, County of Brant, and Six Nations, and all our other partners. COVID-19 has affected every facet of our lives, and this is undoubtedly a very challenging time, but one I know we'll get through by working together. We have a common purpose. We all have to continue to do our part, to stay apart, in order to help contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect those at increased risk. This action, along with vigilantly washing our hands and cleaning services, is vital to protect those most vulnerable in our community and, of course, our healthcare system. I am proud of how people throughout our community and region have heeded the warnings from our public health officials and have complied with the provincial and municipal orders that are in place right now to protect us and our loved ones. We're in this together, and we can continue to reduce the impact of our community if we all keep following those measures. At this time, most city facilities and offices are closed as we seek to protect everyone's health. But we're still working very hard here at the city, virtually remaining vigilant and active. Essential city services such as emergency, fire, police services, health and human services, Brantford Transit, public works, water operations, and our customer service and communication continue. On behalf of the Brantford City Council, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone at the city that's been working so hard to continue to deliver the vital services under the most trying of circumstances. During this difficult and challenging time, we must act to take care of each other. Please do your part by staying safe and staying home if you're not an essential worker. Thank you. I'm now going to, today is, it's a very pivotal day in the history of our community, as we're marking for the first time ever a regular City Council meeting taking place under the rules that provide for virtual meetings under Bill 187, the Municipal Emergency Act 2020. Meetings of this format, we're into uncharted waters, and for many municipalities, that means we're testing the outer realm of electronic remote attendance at meetings in response to this declared emergency. So staff have undertaken extensive testing of this system, and they've assembled all the necessary resources to support members in the event that there is a technical issue. So during the declared emergency, in accordance with the city's emergency council procedures, items to be considered by City Council do not first go through a standing committee or committee of the whole. They proceed directly to be considered by Council. And we intend to follow a cycle of meetings every 2 weeks during the duration of the emergency declaration. So items proceed direct to Council as appropriate. So the following will provide a frame of reference for members of Council and the public. In essence, the procedural rules that apply to these meetings. So first of all members will be muted upon entering the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras that Council members have must be left turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meetings should the need arise to answer any questions that we may have. And of course, they're not here in the City Council chambers. They are elsewhere in the building or working from home. Any member of City Council or staff participating via online video conference should indicate that they wish to speak by pushing the raised hand button on your screen, which should be in the lower right-hand corner. Staff that are with me in the council chambers, they'll keep track of raised hands to generate for me a speakers list. And so if you notice that your hand symbol has disappeared, members of council, that doesn't mean we've lost you. It just means staff have noted that you wish to speak, and they then communicate that to me. So in the event that we have an interruption in our connection, we'll recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes if we're losing quorum. If we can't regain quorum, then the meeting will be adjourned. So all members of City Council participating via online video conference will vote by a physical show of hands, and you'll see that in a few minutes. Delegations, we have none tonight, but delegations in the future will be submitted in writing and will form part of the official record. So I thank all of you for your patience, including that of the viewers, as we work our way through this new pathway. So members of council, does anybody have a declaration of pecuniary interest that they wish to make regarding any item on tonight's agenda? I'm seeing a shaking of heads. So there are no written delegations that we received respecting any matter that's on our agenda this evening. So we'll move into committee reports, and council will now consider item 6.1, the Committee of the Whole Report, Community Development 2020-03-10B. So the items contained in this report are as follows. 6.11, appointment of a building inspectors, property standard officers. B, that staff report CD 2020-90 regarding the appointment of building inspectors, property standards officers be received. And B, that the clerk be directed to place the bylaw to amend Chapter 429 and Chapter 132 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code, attached hereto as Appendix A before council for consideration. So to begin with, I'll read the motion to approve the committee report, the actual motion itself. So item 6.1, Committee of the Whole, Community Development Report 2020-03-10B be approved. Now, Councillor Sless, I understand you're going to move the motion to get it on the floor. If you please confirm that.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So can I get a seconder? So Councillor Weaver is seconding. You just confirm that, please, Councillor Weaver.
Yes, I'll be happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Now, I believe there's an amendment to item 6.11, and prior to the introduction of the amendment, is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move right into the amendment. So I'll now read the amendment to item 6.1.1, and that clause B of item 6.1.1 of the Committee of the Whole Community Development Report 2020-03-10B be amended to include the additional appointment of Alicia Erdlach and Philip Telfer as municipal law enforcement officers as contained within Appendix A. And I understand, Councillor Weaver, you're prepared to move that amendment?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Wall. Councillor Wall is seconding that. So any discussion on the amendment? Yes, Councillor Utley. I'm not hearing him.
Needs to hit his space bar.
Councillor Utley, can you push the mute button in the bottom left corner? Unmute.
There, how's that?
There, okay, now I'm going to start to time you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm interested to know, can staff explain what the role of these two employees will be?
All right, so I think that goes to Mr. Moore. There you are, Mr. Moore. Can you answer that question for us?
Hi, good evening. Yes, Paul Moore, General Manager, Community Development. So these two new employees have been brought on specifically to assist with COVID-19 complaints that we are receiving. One is a former employee, and the other is a summer student that we have had with us for a couple of summers. So they are specifically assisting with all of those calls. So calls related to gatherings in parks and anything else related to COVID-19, any non-essential businesses that might be open, they'll be addressing those calls as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Councillor Utley?
No, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Now I have Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
This question would be for Paul as well, I assume. Paul, that brings to a full complement of what? How many staff do we have on as bylaw enforcement officers at the moment?
The inclusion of these two brings us up to 9, and one is specifically related to animal control.
Okay, and a follow-up question, Mr. Mayor, please. Paul, in oversight, who is managing these 9 individuals, and are they working 2 or 3 different shifts? What is the arrangement?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so we have all of the bylaw officers are working through their manager, Mr. Anderson, Gary Anderson, who's manager of bylaw enforcement. We have 2 shifts. They're on 5 days on, 5 days off, and we've got about 3 or 4 officers on per shift. And they're trying to cover the primary hours of around 10 in the morning till 8 at night. That seems to be the peak hours for the COVID-related calls, but they are covering the entire day, 8:30 till 11 o'clock.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Mayor, one more follow-up question. In case there is any sort of an altercation or an issue where further support is required, all of the lines of communication are open between our newly hired officers, our existing officers, and any support and backup they may require?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we're working very closely with the police department, and they are there to assist with any calls that we have that we need their backup, and they've been excellent so far in providing that backup service to our employees.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I now have on the list Councillor Sluss.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is through to Paul as well. Paul, I assume that we're covering weekends as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are.
And just secondly to that, if you gave the hours of work, I believe from 10 till about 8 in the evening, if something comes in that pertains to the enforcement that these folks are dealing with, and it comes in at 10 o'clock at night, who would respond to that?
The calls are going through the call center. They're also being, there's an email address that through the day that they can go directly to bylaw. And through the night, the calls are being forwarded to the manager as well, so he can screen them and get them out to the officers that are still working.
But at 10 o'clock, my understanding is nobody would be working at 10 o'clock at night. So if there's something going on that should be attended to, who would do that?
Oh, if I can clarify, no, the bylaw officers are on until 11 o'clock at night. But the key hours that they're trying to cover is that 10 in the morning till 8 at night, or 10 at night, sorry. But they are on until 11 o'clock every day. And like I said, if the late calls come in later in the evening, they're going directly to the manager, and he can filter those out to the officers that are on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next up, Councillor Martin.
The wording I have in the amendment says municipal law enforcement officers. Is that a mistake in the writing of the amendment, or is there a different duty for these two than typical bylaw officers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that's the duties are their traditional bylaw enforcement. I believe that is their actual name, municipal law enforcement.
Oh, okay, so municipal law enforcement officers enforce bylaws.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just got a notice that I think our CEO, Brian Hutchings, would like to respond to one of the questions. Mr. Hutchings.
Councillor Sluss's question regarding after hours. All right, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So Councillor Sluss's question regarding after hours, we're working, the EOC in the mornings, we're working very close to the police, Councillor Sluss. A lot of those calls are directed to the police as well, and they're answering those calls after hours as well. And in the mornings, Mr. Anderson and Inspector Reeder match up their notes. As well as in addition, if you've read our minutes, we have FPOs, fire prevention officers out there as well. Now they can't issue tickets and things, but they're being the eyes and the ears of the bio officers as well. So there's about 3 stages of enforcement we're doing right now with the FPOs, the bio officers, and we've hired 2 more because they're working 7 days a week, as Mr. Moore has said, and as well as the police are working hand in glove with our bio officers. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, anything else?
No, that's covered my issue.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Weaver.
Thank you very much, Mayor Davis. Question through you to city staff. Are we going to be able to, obviously we're going to be tracking the calls we get for any COVID-related concerns. Will we be able to track and get a record, maybe in the report, as to what our totals are? I'm hoping they're not going to be very high, but I think it would be good information to know and to share it with the public.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we're tracking the calls. I'm sure we can get that information. I believe that the police are also tracking theirs, and I think they have to report their calls in as well. So yeah, we absolutely can get that information and make it available to council.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next I have Councillor Wall.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff. Thank you, Brian, for providing a little bit more clarity on Councillor Celeste's question about after hours. Can we please make a note to work with communications to get messaging out to people about maybe some clarity on how we're handling after hour concerns and complaints? I mean, a huge shout out to bylaw staff. I've had a number of calls and emails and tags on social media from constituents about bylaw concerns. I know they're out there addressing them, but there's still, just from the vibe that I'm getting out in the public, who to call, when to call, why to call, and people aren't, it doesn't seem that people in general are grasping the whole email idea. People like the tangible. They want to be able to pick up a phone call, like a phone, and make a phone call. Well, for the most part, it should be easy enough to just type in what your concern is in an email. So could we just maybe work on the deliverable, the message that we're putting out for how complaints are being handled and who they're being handled by? Because one of the #1 calls that I'm fielding right now from constituents is, if it's a business, if it's a public gathering, if it's, who do you call and when do you call and why do you call? And should you call? Yeah, can we get some feedback on that?
So
Mr. Hutchings,
I'll get that for Mr. Moore. The short answer is yes, we can communicate it. You've heard me just answer the previous question about three different groups responding to questions, with our bylaw officers being the primary group and our FPOs, our firemen helping out, as well as our police. It gets even more confusing, Councillor Wall, as you suggested, because the health unit has tobacco enforcement officers out there, as well as public health inspectors. They're doing the businesses, and we're doing the public spaces and the gatherings of more than 5 people in public spaces. So it is a little confusing and between the two parties, but Mr. Anderson is doing a very good job working with the health unit as well as our police. But I will work with Maria Visaki, our Director of Communications, to try to get this information out. But it is confusing with a lot of the parties.
My suggestion would be a flow chart of source of what the issue is, where it goes. Some of the concerns right now that are coming up are fires. You know, people are having backyard fires. Do you call the fire department? Do you call bylaw? People are calling the police. There's a lot of criticism online of people using resources and calling 911 for issues that should be done through the emergency line. And I just want to make sure that everybody is at home right now with maybe a little too much time on their hands, and they're calling anybody who will listen. And social media is probably not the best place to be airing your grievances about what's going on in your community. Call the city's number, right? That is probably the best start. It's the customer service line of the city.
Yes, if through you, Mr. Mayor, Your Worship, if that's a question, that is the short answer is yes. That's the best number, and we can divert either the public health or take it on ourselves.
Thank you.
All right, next up I have Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you very much. I have 2 questions. The first relates to some clarity around exactly what enforcement we're carrying on with respect to the 2 municipally owned golf courses. Are we permitting people to walk the courses, or are we not?
So I'll answer that, Paul. I guess, Your Worship, the short answer is yes. We're allowing them to walk the courses. They're not allowed to be playing the courses with clubs or any sort of golf instruments, but they are allowed to walk the courses at the moment. There was some confusion that was clarified earlier this week on Tuesday about that, but people are allowed to walk the courses.
So the information that was originally provided to the bylaw enforcement officers has now been changed then?
Yes, as recently as Tuesday, Councillor McCreary.
Thank you. Secondly, so we have 3 parties who are receiving complaints. We've got us, we've got city police, and we've got health unit. Now, if somebody calls the City of Brantford switchboard and it's a health unit complaint, we're not telling them to call the health unit. We're taking the info and passing that on, or how are we coordinating the different agencies?
You want to answer that one, Paul, from the bylaw perspective?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So when the calls come in, you're right. They can go to 3 different organizations. It's my understanding that we're providing the information to the inquiry and getting them the right connection, so that if it is a health-related issue, then it goes on to the health unit.
So, but are we receiving the information from the complainant and then forwarding it to the folks concerned, or are we telling them to call the police or call the health unit?
I believe we're taking the information and gathering that information, but if they need to speak directly to the health unit or to the police, then they're redirected to the right channel that they need to speak to.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
All right, Councillor Van Tilburg.
We have an FAQ of some sort set up. There's a lot of different rules out there, and because people are seeing news from pretty much across the world and from city to city, province to province, and state to state. So there's a lot of mixed perception on what is right and wrong. So if they're seeing something that is wrong that's in another state or province or country, sometimes they apply that to the local municipality, and then there's some things we have going on here that are not happening elsewhere. Do we have a way that allows people to, I want to get 2 things out of this. One, people with the concerns that are valid to the municipality, I want them to call the municipality and not just vent on social media. And the other part is I don't want people that are bringing a lot of misinformation and then, I want and tying up city resources. So, because they are few and far between, and I'm sure your contacts are significantly more. So is there, I guess, an FAQ so people can know what it is within the city and a process to handle it, much like Councillor Wall was suggesting along the flowchart line?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we currently, there are a number of FAQs on the city's website. Again, we can go back and look at enhancing that information. We also produced a brochure that all the bylaw officers have with them, so that when they go out on a call, they're handing out this educational document to the public, so the public is getting the firsthand information as to exactly what we can and we cannot enforce. And that's a takeaway that they have with them with every interaction.
Thank you.
All right, I have next Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess we're speaking to the whole resolution as well as the amendment, and that's saves us doing it later. I just want to.
It's evolved that way.
That's fine. It saves us doing it later. The question I would have would be the bylaw enforcement officers. How are they enforcing the bylaw? Is it tickets, the fines? I mean, what is the process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we're enforcing it the same way we always have. It's a 3-step process. So the first is education. The final step is the enforcement. The second is encouragement. So if it's a repeat call, that second call will be encouragement to bring in line the activity with the bylaw, and finally the final step is that enforcement with a ticket. And to date, we've only issued 1 ticket, and that was for a business that was open that was deemed non-essential.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Now, when some of the businesses, small businesses, particularly in town, the language wasn't very clear in the provincial government's list of what businesses could work and what businesses couldn't work. So I'm getting calls from people that, they cut their neighbor's grass, or they cut a couple of lawns around the corner, and they're worrying, are they going to be ticketed or stopped for prevented from doing that? We have a lot of seniors that have services that they need to have to maintain their own homes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, and we're reviewing that current list of essential and non-essential, and when those inquiries come in, if we have questions, and we double check with legal staff to ensure that they are meeting the criteria as being an essential business and that they can be open or that service can be provided.
Will there be ability to provide that clarity to the general public so that they understand what can be done and what can't be done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think we can raise that tomorrow at our EOC meeting, and if we need to provide some more clarification, we can put that kind of a communication out to provide a little bit more clarity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. So, is there anyone else? I guess actually Councilor Antosky, you're the only one who hasn't spoken yet, but so I'll move into, actually, Mr. Hudgens, is there something else you want to add to that response?
Just if I can, Mr. Mayor, thank you for recognizing my hand. It's just additional information to Councilor Wall's question as well as to Councilor Van Tilburg's question. We do have on our website a city reporting process page that has all the steps, as well as the Brant County Health Unit has a COVID-19 complaints page as well. And as well, we have the FAQs are on our website as well. We'll have another look at those based on this discussion tomorrow, as Mr. Moore suggested, but they are up there. And if you want to have a look at them, I can forward the links on to council tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hutchings. So I have in this, Councilor Sluss has asked to speak a second time. So Councilor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just, while we've been having the discussion about what's legal and not legal on a golf course, I've received an email from a member at a private club at the Brantford Country Club, and they tried to get clarification from the manager of the club, and he said he couldn't get clarification from the city, and all he wanted to know was, can they walk on the golf course if they're observing social distancing and in a group of less than 5? Is that legal, or would they be fined?
Who wants to answer that one? Mr. Moore, Mr. Hutchings?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe in that situation, again, it's a private property and private members, and I believe that they are able to walk on that course as long as, again, as they are practicing social distancing. That's my interpretation of it.
The writer asked if he could get that in writing from the city. So if that could be sent to me, and I'll forward that on.
Yeah, that'll have to, actually, I think we have Heidi, our city solicitor. Heidi DeVries, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the councillor. If people have specific questions about what their rights are in terms of, do they fall within the essential business category, or can they participate in certain activities, they're encouraged to call the provincial hotline, Stop the Spread. That hotline has been set up by the provincial government to answer those types of questions. The City of Brantford does not provide advice to members of the public, businesses, or otherwise with respect to what the rights and obligations may be under provincial legislation. As Mr. Moore mentioned, if someone is approached by bylaw officers of the city or other law enforcement officers, and they're able to demonstrate that they believe they are essential, then our officers are working with the legal department to work through that information, and will provide information. We do take an education first approach before we issue tickets. So I know there's a lot of concern that you're going to get massive fines and large tickets. We do have the ability to lay informations under Part 3 as well, and those fines are rather large. But for the most part, we're trying to work with people to work through the legislation. But we are not in a position to provide private entities like that golf course, for instance, advice with respect to what they may or may not do with their property at this time.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else wish to speak for a second time? Seeing nobody. So I will call the vote then on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. So please raise your hand and keep raised until your name is called, starting with those in favor, please. Councillor Wall, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor Martin, Mayor Davis. Those opposed? Councillor Utley, if you could please confirm whether you're in favor, please. Thank you. That motion carried.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So any discussion on item 6.1.1 as amended? I see Councillor Wall.
I said it before, and I just want to say it again. To the bylaw officers out there working on the front lines right now, thank you so much for your service to the city, and keep doing an incredible job. It can't be easy.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Somehow I've lost it. Okay. Sorry, your mayor was showing his incompetence. Anyone else want to speak second time? No, actually, first time the amendment. Not seeing any others. Oh, Councillor Carpenter, yes. Would you like to speak to the motion as amended?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to know, I believe the bylaw enforcement officer are under the direction of Gary Anderson. And if so, my concern would be, are we overburdening Mr. Anderson? Is he able to handle the extra workload? That sort of, and really to all senior staff that are managing a lot of hours, are we managing to manage that workload and make sure that they're able to take care of themselves as well?
So it's through you, Mr. Mayor, it's Brian Hutchings speaking. Yes, it is. The first answer the first question. Yes, it is Gary Anderson, the manager. Secondly, every morning we have an EOC at 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, and part of the update to everybody is if they have the staffing requirements to do their jobs, and if they need any other assistance. It's kind of standard question we ask, everybody answers. And Gary Anderson at this point in time, and that's why we offered up the 2 extra people, one out of retirement, one a summer student to assist him. At this point in time, his update to us every morning is that he has the adequate resources enough to do his job. They are busy. A lot of people are busy, but that is his response every morning at 8:30 at the meetings.
And we're moving into the season where we as councillors are going to get a number of calls, bylaw infractions and so forth. We're still to forward them to Gary Anderson's office for action.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I have full confidence in Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. I have Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. I wonder if somebody could update us on the status of our park bike patrols. Are we in business this year, and when do they come on stream, if so?
So our park bike patrols, at this for bylaw, are you referring to, Councilor McCreary, or the recent ones we're doing on the trails? I'm sorry, I missed half of that.
This is the typical trail enforcement that we do with the students on motorcycles.
Okay. Paul, would you know that answer? I know I can start the first answer, Mr. McCreary, Councilor McCreary, we through the mayor. We have right now allocated some recreation staff to assist right now in educating people on our trails about physical distancing. 2 of our staff, they're meeting at the trailheads and what have you, and educating people. That's been going on the last week, and they're assisting with that. But the question to your specific, I'll let Mr. Moore answer that question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Those staff, they're not part of bylaw enforcement. I'm not sure if they are Parks and Rec staff or if they are affiliated with the police, but they're not bylaw enforcement staff. So I don't know 100% if that program is going to start up on time as it normally would.
I can add to that. As a member of the Police Services Board, they are hired by the police services, Brantford Police Services. I can't answer that question for you, but I can certainly find that out for you, Councillor.
Yeah, I wonder if, Mayor, we might have that in a memo as soon as we can. Councillor Martin and I have been out on the trails a number of times, and it seems to it's like the Wild West out there. Folks don't know the rules and regulations, and they sure aren't practicing social distancing in a lot of cases. And if we can make use of that resource to do some enforcement, perhaps by tweaking their responsibilities or their bylaw, that would certainly help a great deal.
Well, as I said, Councillor McCreary, I'll undertake to do that for you. Anybody else wish to speak to the matter as amended? Seeing no one, I'll call the vote, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So please again, raise your hand and keep raised until your name is called, starting with those in favor, please. Councillor Wall, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilborg, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, and Mayor Davis. Item 6.11 as amended is carried.
Thank you. All right, so we'll now move into resolutions. And there are several resolutions that are before us tonight, and we'll follow a slightly different procedure for tonight. On April 28th, it probably be slightly different, but I'll end up having for tonight to actually read the resolution itself, even though as chair, I'm not moving it. So this is item 7.1, the temporary use bylaw to permit the use of recreational vehicles in the city of Brantford. It's a rather long resolution, so sit tight. So whereas the coronavirus known as COVID-19 poses a significant threat to the health and well-being of people around the world, including residents of the city of Brantford, and whereas the Government of Ontario, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, declared an emergency on March 17th, 2020 at 7:30 a.m. pursuant to Section 7.01 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, and whereas the head of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford, in response to COVID-19 pandemic, declared an emergency on March 19th, 2020 at 3:16 p.m. pursuant to Section 4.1 of the Act. Whereas public health authorities have advised that self-isolation and physical distancing are important tools to prevent or slow down the spread of COVID-19, and whereas frontline workers such as healthcare professionals, food service workers, truck drivers, grocery store clerks, transit drivers, etc., they wish to limit exposure of persons in their households by seeking alternate forms of accommodation. And whereas those who have tested positive for COVID-19 may also wish to seek alternate accommodation to ensure proper separation from members of their household during the recovery period. And whereas the use of motorhomes or travel trailers, recreational vehicles, by frontline workers or those exposed to or who have tested positive COVID-19 may result in achieving critical public health goals such as reducing exposure to COVID-19 and slowing the spread of this deadly virus. And whereas the City of Brantford zoning bylaw and the County of Brant zoning bylaw applicable to the annexed lands within the City of Brantford contain certain restrictions with respect to the use and storage of recreational vehicles within the City of Brantford. And whereas the Council for the Corporation of the City of Brantford desires to ensure that frontline workers and those with increased exposure to COVID-19 are provided every opportunity to keep members of their household safe while remaining home during this pandemic. Now, therefore, the Council for the Corporation of the City of Brantford hereby resolves as follows. A, that planning staff be directed to prepare a report which shall proceed directly to Council regarding the application of temporary use bylaw pursuant to Section 39 of the Planning Act to address Section 6.18.8 of the City of Brantford zoning bylaw 11690 and Section 5.14 of the County of Brant zoning bylaw 61-16 to permit the use of motorhomes and travel trailers, recreational vehicles, for temporary occupancy until the declaration of emergency of the head of council for the Corporation of the City of Brantford expires or is otherwise terminated. And B, that staff be directed to limit their investigations and enforcements of complaints regarding Section 6.18.8 of zoning bylaw 16090 and sections 5.14 of zoning bylaw 61-16 to those matters that are related to the health and safety and all other enforcement of the aforementioned provisions relating to parking and use of recreational vehicles in the residential areas of the City of Brantford be suspended until the earlier of the following. One, such time as councils have an opportunity to review the temporary use bylaw referred to in Clause A above, or the declaration of emergency of the head of the council, the corporation, city of Brantford, expires or is otherwise terminated. And Councillor Antonsky, I understand you're moving this resolution. Please confirm.
Yes, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion to get it on the floor? Seconded
Councillor
by
Carpenter.
Councillor Carpenter. Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. So, any discussion on item 7.1? Yes. Councillor Antonsky, your motion, you go first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a way, I think many of us have heard from people who are essential workers. They're struggling in that right, you know, forced to go to work and dealing in very stressful circumstances, and then having the added stress of keeping their families safe. And so I think that the one statement that's made in here is, you know, for frontline or essential workers and those with increased exposure to COVID-19 are provided every opportunity to keep members of their household together. I think this is something that the city of Brantford can do on a temporary measure to allow people to do a little bit more in terms of feeling safer and keeping that separation, that they're not bringing home things to their family. It's tough enough for a lot of them. You know, there's people that aren't able to hug their kids right now. And I really want to thank our solicitor for helping to write this up. I think this is an easy way that we can provide support to the many essential workers that are allowing us to go on with our lives and to keep people fed and healthy and allow them to still be close to home.
Next up, Councillor Sluss.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have actually a number of questions. At first blush, the intent is honorable, and I understand the intent, and I think the intent is well thought, but it raised some concerns, and maybe I can get answers that might help alleviate some of the concerns that I have. And I'm not sure who to address them to, so I'll lay them out there, and whatever member of staff that could jump in, I'd appreciate it. The first concern I have is, where exactly are these units going to be parked?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, pardon me. So they would be parked in driveways of residential properties. Currently, the zoning bylaw allows recreational vehicles to be parked in a rear yard or side yard, and then they are permitted to be put parked in the front yard on a temporary basis, 72 hours per month, and they can be occupied for 14 days per month. So if this resolution is passed, the trailers or RV units would be allowed to park in the front yard, so basically on the driveway of a residential property.
Is there anything to stop anybody, if this was approved, to parking it on the street in front of their home?
The way this is worded, it's when we bring the temporary bylaw forward, the temporary use bylaw forward, it will lay out all the regulations. So the bylaw will specifically say that it needs to be within the front yard on the driveway. If they're parked on the street, it brings up a whole other concern with parking and visibility and health and safety issues on the street itself.
Have we researched to see that there is a company within reasonable distance of the city that can service these vehicles? What I'm thinking of, they have limited capacity to hold sewage. They have limited capacity to hold gray water. Who would be servicing this? Is there something local, or is this could be a huge problem if there's nobody to deal with?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that was an issue that we identified. We have not done research on how that would be handled. It's something that would have to be investigated by the property owner, I believe, if they're looking to do this. But again, it's something that we can address in our report when we bring it forward.
Just two more, if I could, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any concept of how many people we're talking about? How many potential trailers or RVs that we're talking about?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, no, we don't have an idea of how many we could see being used in this situation.
Okay, thank you. And just finally to the city solicitor, if we allow this to happen by bylaw, are we still exposed to any liability?
Through your worship, that's not a question that I can answer in open session. If council would like a fulsome report on that, we can certainly prepare a legal memorandum, or I would recommend a deferral of this matter to the in-camera meeting of council scheduled for April 21st.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Celeste. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. I've had one constituent who has had concern. Obviously, if a trailer is attached to a vehicle, it's allowed to be on the street. So I don't see what the difference is of it being unattached from the vehicle. I don't see a lot of differences. I don't even have a problem if we're going to move to where they could do an online application where they show proof of insurance, liability, and those sorts of things electronically, of course. But I got a problem if we're going to say we're restricted to a driveway. We know that in some of our communities, the developers have made the driveway so small they barely fit a regular car, let alone a trailer that with a tongue on it that will protrude into the driveway access. I think that creates a more dangerous problem. So I'd like us to look at this a little more holistically. I don't think there's going to be a rush of thousands of trailers on the streets. This is to accommodate those that are making sacrifices by keeping us all healthy, by us being able to stay home. I think we can certainly go the extra mile for those people. And as far as liability, I've been around council a long time. I know council is always liable for everything. It doesn't matter what it is.
Thank you. Councillor Wall.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. For confirmation, we're not approving this tonight. We're just approving a report to come back to us to approve it at another time, or to potentially approve it at another time.
Mr. Moore, there was a suspension of enforcement entailed in this resolution or not?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, it's a two-parter. So there would be direction to staff to come back with a report on bring forward the temporary use bylaw, and then the part B is that there's a temporary suspension on enforcement so if people are using the trailers now. The only issues that we would pursue in terms of enforcement if it's a public health and safety issue. So, for example, if there's an issue with conflict with pedestrians and things like that, those are types of issues that bylaw enforcement would attend to.
Okay, next question. A number of the streets in Ward 5 are unbelievably narrow. And if we get a trailer on one side and a trailer on the other side, it can pose some pretty significant safety issues for traffic, for pedestrians, for emergency vehicles. So I want clarification on whether or not they can park on the road or not. And if they are parked on the road, is it one side of the road only, or what's the messaging going to be around that? Oh, and major arteries. Like, we're not going to have trailers parked on Colburn and Dalhousie, right? Or Wayne Gretzky Parkway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through the report that we come back with, we'll do an analysis on parking on the street, and we'll provide recommendations on those, because every street would be different. Yes, you wouldn't want to see trailers parked on major arteries through the city, but we will address the on-street parking issue in the report when we come back.
I worry about what's fair and what's not fair, because if you live on Colburn, why can you do it on Murray, but you can't do it on, but whatever, that's for you guys to deal with. Complaints, if we're gonna do this, which I have a feeling we're going to, then we're gonna get, I get calls already about trailers and buses and large vehicles parked on the road. So we're gonna have to make sure we have a proper communication sent out to the public about what's allowed, what's not allowed, and how we're gonna handle complaints on that. So that's just maybe a memo for your report. The next question, if I may, who's going to police who these are being used by? I understand the intention is to have them used by a resident of the property, but what's to stop people from, yeah, I guess, does that make sense?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it does. And we can't, in land use planning, you can't zone for ownership or occupancy. So again, we're going to have to rely on if there's concerns that it's not, a patient or a frontline worker that's using the trailer and there's a complaint, the bylaw will respond to that complaint. So it'll be based on a complaint-driven program, just like it is now.
I really like the suggestion of like an online registration with the city. I think that Councillor Carpenter suggested. Okay, if I may, one last one. And this is more in the realm of fairness. Can we define recreational vehicle? Like, what if somebody has a VW Bug that they would rather stay in to put their safety of their family first? Does it have to be an RV or a trailer or a standard recreational vehicle, or can it be the cab of a pickup truck or a tent or what are we defining recreational vehicle as for this term or for this resolution?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, when we come back with the report, we'll specifically define and clarify that. There's a definition in the zoning bylaw now, but I think in this situation, you want to broaden it a bit so that there are greater opportunities for more people to take advantage of different types of vehicles. So we'll bring that forward again for council's consideration as part of the temporary bylaw.
So my final statement is I'm fully prepared to support this. I just think there's going to be some hiccups. And thank you, Councillor Antosky, for moving this forward, because this is a good idea. Thank you.
Councillor Rutley. Councillor, you have to hit the mute.
How's that?
That's good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consider about the potential for abuse. While there may be a number of very valid people and honest people that would use it for the right reasons, I'm sure there'll be almost an opposite number that may use it for reasons other than what they're intended for. Do we know how many other communities are allowing RVs to be used in driveways?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't really dug into this and excuse me, completed a lot of research. I believe City of Hamilton may be allowing it, but again, we will find that out and bring it back to you.
So Paul, I can, through Mr. Mayor, I can answer that. We've done some research in this. Our Chief of Staff has reached out to a number of municipalities and looked at them. There's only one at this moment was done through the EMCP order was Haldeman County has initiated such an order, but no other neighboring municipalities have done this or we're familiar with any other municipality doing this besides Haldeman.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. One more, Mr. Mayor, if I may. The unknown is how much time is this going to take to police? And I'm sure that the bylaw officers, two of which we've just approved, have a lot on their plate right now. And would this take away from what we've got planned for them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would be additional duties, and their primary activities right now are responding to the complaints that are coming in related to COVID-19. So, these calls and complaints that came in, they would have to go into the queue and they're prioritized. And so it may be a bit of time to react to them in terms of staff getting to those calls.
Thank you, Paul. I just want to thank Councillor Antosky. This is creative thinking outside the box, and I want to commend you for bringing this forward. I'm not sure if I support it or not at this point. I'm concerned about it taking away from other things that our bylaw officers could or should be doing with the COVID crisis. Not easy, but I just want to say that, get that out there. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Antosky, for bringing this forward. I appreciate where this is coming from. I would be willing to support it depending on what comes forward. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Paul or Brian. First responder egress. Am I going to make the assumption that this application process, if Councillor Carpenter is correct, if it's an online process, that will actually have a site visit to find out how large of a trailer, RV, temporary housing unit, whatever we want to call that, does not impede on first responders' access to the primary residence. Essentially what we're doing is we're building two residences on the same property. So I want to ensure that we have clear egress to the primary residence and the secondary residence, and that should be a true reflection on the size of the unit that will be installed on the size of driveway. Is that something that you could probably include in what comes back?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely, yes. When we start preparing this, we'll circulate the application out and we'll get that information from fire and first responders, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. And through you, Mr. Mayor, again to Paul. I've been training people to move large pieces of machinery and equipment onto various different sites for quite some time now. So here's what I'm concerned about. If the operator doesn't have a clear site, a line of sight in order to bring the piece of machinery or whatever it is, the trailer onto site and off of site, if the driver doesn't have a clear line of sight, my issue is they need a competent signal person to help them bring that unit in and to help them bring that unit out. That is not the responsibility, in my opinion, of the council, of the corporation. It is the responsibility of the driver and the owner of the piece of whatever it is, to ensure that when we're bringing units in to approved areas for parking for temporary use, that the process by which that happens ensures the safety of the people on the street, ensures the safety of the people on the sidewalk, ensures the safety of the people in the area into which those units are being installed, not only on the way in, but on the way out as well. Is that something that we can even touch or we can even ask to be looked at?
Great. Through your worship, Heidi DeVries, City Solicitor, I just want to be clear as to what's going on here. The notice of motion that's been put forward, which is now a resolution, is simply to temporarily suspend the application of the city zoning bylaw. This is not a city program. The city is not bringing units into people's houses. And you will note that from the wording of this notice of motion / resolution now, that we still remain capable of enforcing health and safety issues. So that means the use of our roads. This is not suspending the application of the city's traffic bylaws. This is simply a temporary use that will be permitted through the city zoning bylaw, which regulates the use of property. It is a responsibility of property owners to determine if that use is appropriate, if it's safe, if fire and police and other emergency services can still access their property, and they remain fully responsible for that. That is not the responsibility of the city of Brantford.
Councillor Vanderstel, is that it?
I'm sorry, did I interject?
No, just you still have a minute and a half left in your first speaking opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what comes back on this. I fully support it as a concept, as an idea. I just want to make sure we cross all our T's and dot all the I's in the process. Thank you.
All right, next up, Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this will be a tough one to support unless there's some really good, clear groundwork involved. I like the idea of a permitting system. People love their trailers, and right now most trailer parks are closed. So I think there might be a few people trying to sneak in some usage, and I'm concerned about that. And I almost think it would be less time consuming for city staff if we developed a permit system than it would be to have a free-for-all and have folks call in and complain, and then we have to send staff out to deal with all those complaints. So I'm really concerned about some abuse that may occur. And we also talked about some of the sightline concerns, so visibility. Obviously, that's going to be a concern too. And I just not sure how we can do this carte blanche with everybody. I think a permitting system where we have the ability to ask some specific questions to make sure those things are checked off our list to make sure that we can proceed safely and without any chance of something coming back to the city where we might be held liable.
Next up, Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you very much. Mr. Moore, I wonder if you might briefly reiterate how trailers and RVs can be legally used on one's property currently.
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. So currently the zoning bylaw allows you to have a trailer in your rear yard or your side yard. You can bring it to your front yard basically on a temporary basis. It can be in your front yard for no more than 72 hours per month, and it can be used habitable for 14 days a month. There's a 1 meter setback from property lines, but those are the general regulations around the trailers right now.
Thank you. And the reason that we don't permit them in the front yards and on the street is what, Mr. Moore?
Primary reason is a visibility issue, is a traffic issue. So if you've got a trailer in your front yard and it's a substantially long trailer, there's issues with getting in and out of your driveway, or your neighbor getting in and out of their driveway. Visibility is blocked. It's hard to see pedestrians if you're backing out of a driveway and your view is obstructed. So there's some health and safety concerns. There's some traffic concerns, visibility, obviously.
And those concerns will begin to realize the import of those if we permit this to happen, I suppose.
That's a possibility, yes, that you'll get those complaints more frequently, yes.
Thank you. Now, currently we have a number of committees within our emergency management family here, one of which is it's an all Brantford City Staff Committee, is that correct? That's been looking at City of Brantford initiatives?
Yes, we have our emergency operations group that meets 8:30 in the mornings.
And that group receives suggestions like this pretty much on a daily basis, I would think. Is that correct?
Yes, there are issues that come through the group that come from Mr. Mayor or through a councillor, yes.
Now, the EOC, is it empowered by way of emergency legislation to be able to make these kinds of decisions on its own?
I'd refer that one to Mr. Hutchings or Ms. DeVries.
So under Section 511 of our municipal procedures, and under the EMPC of the province of Ontario, we do have a authority, and the mayor does have authority to make decisions that are not contrary to law, and as well as for the safety and health of our citizens in the area that's deemed as the emergency. We have declared emergency on March 19th. So we do have ability to do this, but this would be overcoming a bylaw, which is a law of the city. So I think we discussed with the mayor, we felt it should come to council rather than him doing it unilaterally. So that's why it's here before you today. We have had discussion with the EOC. We took it offline to have discussion with bylaw as well as planning and the city solicitor and others. And we basically provided some advice on that. And then it's now in front of you as a motion to possibly to assist in this. But that's the group had felt it didn't have this power to overcome that bylaw.
Sorry, and what was the advice that you mentioned?
There was a memo that was provided. It was asked if we provided a memo to the mayor, which was a confidential memo to the mayor. And I'm not sure if he circulated it or not, but there was a confidential memo provided to the mayor, not through council, but through the mayor, through his request.
Thank you.
Next up, I have Councillor Van Tilburg.
I'm very happy to support this resolution. I think it addresses the issues that are happening amongst families immediately present. I'm very aware of pilots that are being not allowed to actually go into their house. So this is really addressing things that people have already taken into their own hands, staying outside of their own home because they don't want to put their families at risk, or they might have a family member that's more susceptible to getting COVID-19 and they don't want to be the person felt responsible. People are taking these initiatives on their own. This temporary suspension is reflecting the reality of what's out there. And it's going to take a little bit of stress off people that are always wondering, is my neighbor going to call and complain that I'm in the trailer? And that's the kind of judgment that we don't need right now. Nobody knows the different kinds of circumstances of the people that are working out there, what they face and what their families face. So this is very important, and I'm very proud that this has come forward and that we can at least use this temporary measure in order to accommodate these families. I believe that people up to this point in time are using their common sense, and I believe this resolution shows that kind of common sense. The fact that we are going to temporarily not enforce the bylaw and also give time for staff to address all the possible abuses that people are dreaming up can happen. And yeah, you know what, there's always somebody out there that's gonna do something foolish. But right now, I'm not thinking of those people. I'm thinking of the people that are going day in and day out to work in all different kinds of circumstances. And again, the public only thinks of a certain working group that's out there, and there are many. And at any given time, we can be in our workplace and somebody come down with this. And it is stressful for those of us who are going to work, just as stressful as it is for those that are at home. There is no relief from what we're all feeling out there, but what we do want to feel is safe. And not to have that judgment and fear of the city coming down, cracking down on somebody that's trying to protect their family, I think is very, very important. So I applaud this resolution. I know at the end of the day, we'll come to the right balance, but what happens as soon as we vote on this and that there's a restriction is that some people are going to at least have a breath of fresh air. Thank you.
All right, that has everybody in the first speaking. I have some questions. So my question to Mr. Hutchings, what is staff's recommendation? Should we do this or not?
As provided in that the memo that's sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. At this point in time, we're looking at staff's recommendation is we don't do this for a number of reasons. We just had a discussion with our bylaw officers and hiring 2 extra bylaw officers. And with this was felt by our bylaw team that this would cause a lot of other calls coming to them and would, as Mr. Moore said, would create more of a queue for getting at the work they need to do with COVID-19. Mr. Moore highlighted some other areas regarding sight lines. One of the councillors highlighted some staff's concerns regarding the cleaning up of the various residue that's created from trailers. So those are 3 of the big things that we were concerned about: sight lines, as well as workload for the bylaw officers, as well as the cleanliness of our neighborhoods after this is completed. So staff were not supportive of this and that was the memo that went forth.
All right, and also, just so the public knows, I wasn't satisfied. I had the authority under the declaration to do this. So, but another question for you. So this is a referral for a bylaw, but in the meantime, it's actually allowing trailers to be used for this purpose, in essence, the suspension enforcement. Is that correct?
Paul, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, absolutely. It is. It allows staff to go away and do the research and prepare a temporary use bylaw, but the enforcement would be temporarily suspended.
Right, and is that fairly unusual, because now we're not going to really have any guidelines for what's enforced and what's not enforced other than health and safety?
This is unique, absolutely, but it's typically when if there's an infraction to the zoning bylaw and a property owner is bringing their property into conformity and going through an application, then the bylaw is not enforced on that property. So it is very similar to standard procedure in this type of a situation.
And what would the timeline be for the bylaw coming back for us, the actual bylaw amendment, with all this refinement that we're talking about?
To you, Mr. Mayor. So we would fast track this. The earliest we could get this back in front of council would be the end of June.
All right. So I'm going to say that this is a very difficult decision because, you know, we definitely want to do what we can to assist those who are essential workers in adapting to the situation involving them and their families. My concern is, are we creating a worse problem by trying to solve this problem? And one thing that I considered is this issue of sightlines. That may seem very technical, but this is where my experience as a litigation lawyer overtakes me. And a lot of what I did was personal injury litigation, where you spend much of your time as a lawyer thinking of accidents and how they happen. And you know, my fear is that we're going to have a trailer or an RV in someone's front yard, and allowed basically because we're not enforcing. And it's a double driveway and someone's backing out, and you have a child on a bike or walking down the sidewalk and they're struck and injured. I will not want to take on that responsibility, whether it's legal or not. I'm very concerned. I can see that easily happening. And yes, we do have a restriction on the enforcement that bylaw would be able to enforce for health and safety reasons, but what if the only first report of a health and safety incident is someone being injured? I don't think that's just a theoretical possibility. I think it's quite possible. So for me, as in my perspective and my background, as I balance the competing interests, and there's no question that there's a lot behind this that's good and honorable, but when I look at it from my perspective, my experience, I'm going to have to decide. I can't support it for that reason, especially when it's going to be 2 months before we actually have a fully refined bylaw. But in the meantime, there really will be no bylaw preventing RVs from being parked in the front yards. And I think we had that bylaw in place for many years ago for a lot of good reasons, and not just aesthetic reasons. That I think there are some real safety issues here. So for that reason, I can't support it. It has nothing to do with legal liability. It's really just, do I think my vote would create a worse problem than we have now? So, but besides that, I respect those who see it differently. Just that's the way I look at it. So now, Councillor, that keeps me under 5 minutes, but Councillor Martin, you wanted to speak, but I spoke before you because I didn't see your hand up until after I started speaking. So you still haven't spoken in the first round, so you're up next.
Thank you. I thought I got in the queue early, but all of a sudden everybody was getting ahead of me, so I'm not sure we don't have a proper procedure for getting a queue set up here or not. I had a couple of questions.
Councillor Martin.
Hey?
It's not perfect yet, so we're working the bugs out tonight. So I'll start you now at your 5 minutes.
Okay. When this issue first come up, I put the suggestion forward that we ask Lori if these kind of people can be housed in their residence since they sent all the students home. Is that something that's been looked at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. The EOC, there is, in addition to the EOC we've spoken about, Councilor McCurry asked about it, the city EOC, there's a unified EOC that has 13 agencies on it. We've had this discussion. I know Laurier has been in discussions with the hospital. Those haven't progressed. The hospital, I have a discussion with the CEO of the hospital today. The hospital is looking at each case on a case-by-case basis and using the two hotels. They have a contract with 2 hotels in town as well. Laurier couldn't. Their cleaning company wasn't available to do the work to clean their residences. So the hospital has now turned to the 2 hotels in town to house many of their workers if they need it.
Okay, and has the Grand River Conservation Authority been asked to open up Brant Park for RVs with single person occupant to alleviate this problem so we don't have them on their driveways and streets?
The GRCA was contacted, but because of the provincial regulation that all the conservation authorities had to close their parks down, they're under provincial requirements. They can't open unless the province relaxes that requirement.
Okay. And if this doesn't pass, this will still be enforced on a complaint basis?
Yes.
Okay, and as a firefighter, that's always been a concern, is bringing something home to the family. So I fully understand where this whole issue is coming from. However, if there are alternatives that are better, such as discounted hotel rooms for hospital staff or first responders, I think that's a more appropriate way to deal with this. And because this is on a complaint basis, I mean, most people know their neighbors. They know who's a nurse, who's a doctor, who's a firefighter. If one of them has an RV in their driveway, I can't imagine somebody calling in a complaint against their doctor neighbor or their neighbor who's a nurse. So I think as long as we, deal with things properly, I know there's a lot of appreciation for people who are providing essential services. And as long as you're reasonable about it, I can't see anybody complaining about an RV in a driveway, as long as it's not blocking views and sticking out onto the sidewalk. So I don't think we need to pass this tonight. I think we need to wait a little while and see if a more serious problem comes up. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Martin. So I have now in the second list of speakers, so I have Councillor Carpenter, Weaver, Utley. I assume Councillor Antosky, you want the wrap up? I'll give it to you.
Yes,
So
please.
Councillor Carpenter, I think you're first in that queue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is really it is common sense here, but maybe when we first asked the question a couple of weeks ago of staff, if the response was, we will only enforce this by a complaint basis rather than someone driving around as a bylaw enforcement officer and seeing a trailer parked in the street. And if those individuals had a sign in the trailer saying, first responder worker, which is not just firefighters and police officers, it's cashiers, it's tellers, it's a lot of people out there that are frontline workers. They're all at risk. I have a daughter and a daughter-in-law that are both nurses. They're at risk. They worry every day when they come home, whether they're giving it to their children. They've made a special allocations, which have a special washroom for them that can separate the house if they come down with the COVID-19, but not everybody has that ability. So these are extraordinary times, which calls for extraordinary measures, not about what risk level we're at, it's about what risk level the community is at. So we need to be willing to bend. The other thing I suggest, I think Councilor Martin made a good point about we should be checking. We have 4 brand new hotels in the community. We could ask them, will they step up and provide our first responders as locations for if they're worried about getting it, or if they do get it and need to self-isolate someplace. These are things that we need to prepare for everybody in our community as well. So, I'd be happy if, as long as we're not going to have bylaw enforcement officers going around aggressively looking for those that, have got a trailer up front with a sign on it, that they're a first responder, they're not going to get a ticket. I've already responded to someone. If you feel unsafe, you do what you need to do to be safe. That's my automatic response. I know about first line worker that was at Costco getting her groceries, and she was 20th in line, and the whole line stepped out of line to let her go first because they recognize what these people are doing and the sacrifice they're making on our behalf. Most people in our community have common sense, if not all, and they're not going to be the ones that are going to complain needlessly against someone doing what they need to do to keep safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to echo what Councillor Martin said. I think there's definitely a need for something, but not everyone has access to a trailer or owns a trailer. So I would, if we're going to be looking at trying to help some of these folks out, would much rather do something that's going to be able to help everyone out rather than just a select group of people that may be able to afford to have a trailer or have access to a trailer that from a friend or whatnot. So the hotels, I know I've received an email from the folks at the hotel. I'm sure all of council also has received that email. It seems like there may be a desire for them to help us out. And I would hope that staff would reach out to them to see if we can't work something out first. If this is a last case scenario that's going to help folks, of course, I think it's something that we need to seriously look at. But again, I'd be concerned about we're only helping out a few folks that actually have access to trailers. I think doing something for everyone, perhaps there's some federal or provincial dollars that might actually assist municipalities too. That might be forthcoming in one of the multiple announcements that are done every day. So I think we'll have a bit more of a robust conversation on April 21st when we're able to do this in camera and get some advice from our city solicitor as well. So, so I think I will support the report coming forward, but I'll have some hard questions to ask of our city solicitor on April 21st.
All right, next up I have Councillor Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, have we received any formal requests from RV owners or others to use RVs in their driveways? Or has it come through some councillors?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Utley, I have not heard myself any requests come in through the planning department or building or bylaw department. I think this is in response to the inquiry through Councillor Antosky that came in last week.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Van Tilburg.
I know that we want to help everybody, and I think we can do that. Not everybody has the ability for a hotel at a 30% discount every day while they're going to work with some of their hours cut back, but they may have a trailer. They may have something that can protect it so that they can protect their families. You know, I really think that we have to help those who are trying to do what's best. There's this perception that there's only first responders out there engaging with the public. You're going to see many more people engaging with the public as more industrial places come back online. That's happening. We've seen that. So there's other industries that are still going. There are people going to work every day. There are people that work in our, we are broad in the terms. That essential service is basically everybody driving to work. And a lot of the perceptions here are coming from people that aren't going to work and wondering, oh, I expect these people that aren't going to work are going to get some trailer or something. The other thing that we're trying to look is with that reducing the levels of stress. I think it would be great if you could have somebody go and use one of the facilities, a hotel, a residence of the universities. But I'll tell you, if all you have to do is have your clothes set outside and to your trailers, and that you can have some interaction that way at your own residence, that's important. There are things out there that are very important to people, and we don't know how long this is going to go on for. I don't have that crystal ball. But I do know that there are going to be people that are going to continue to be going to work, that have to interact with other people, that there are many, many circumstances out there that do not allow for social distancing at all times, that you are constantly, unfortunately, in those conditions where you have to interact with other people and you're much closer than that. That's just the reality of what's out there. And when you do that, you're at risk. And people think about that risk. There are people who actually go to work and their families say, we don't want you in the home. My goodness. But they would allow trailer or something outside. That the dangers are out there. And I think that we are going to look at this a little deeper. That report will come back. I don't see how doing a temporary relief on the situation of allowing for the RVs. We can reassess that as we hear people start to complain about the rights and the wrongs. But that temporary relief is actually going to free up some of our bylaw enforcement officers because they won't have to investigate. We'll get the calls. We'll hear the stuff. They will go to staff and they can analyze it. But what I do know is that people will get the relief of not having somebody will say, oh, no, you know, your neighbor won't call. Well, I'll tell you, there's some neighbors out there that will call. And they will call because they can. Because they're at home all day with a lot of time on their hands and they don't know why neighbors across the road is doing that. They don't understand that, oh, he's not a doctor. He's not a nurse. Why is he outside? That happens. So anything we can do to make people's lives better, I'm for. When I hear of we'd like to help everybody, well, let's hear what that is. This is something, and this can be helpful to those that have the means and the resources, and it's not about a big luxury. I would not want to trade my position with somebody that has to say, I can't go in my home, I have to do this through a trailer.
Thank you, Councillor Van Schilberg. Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it was my understanding we've had at least 2 hotels come forward with offers to house people. Is that correct? Can anybody answer that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, council has been more than 2. There's been a number of them, about 4 or 5.
Now, I heard this evening somebody, I'm not sure which councillor said it, but that there's a 30% discount. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, there's been various discounts. That has been one, yes, and other hotels have offered free floor, but then other to people, but also if they take another floor. So it ranges, Councillor Slush, but there are discounts on the rooms, and various parts of our emergency services are using them.
Okay, and then, again, I don't know who to address this to, Mr. Mayor, but if this passes this evening, what exactly is that? We're asking for a report, but we're also implementing at the same time, are we not? If this passes tonight, tomorrow morning, we're not enforcing anything. So we're already implementing.
I'll let Paul Moore or Heidi explain exactly what this is being passed.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it is a 2-step process, reporting back and bringing forward a temporary use bylaw to allow the trailers in the front yard. But the B part is that if it's passed, that the enforcement is suspended, and we would only be answering complaints that are related to health and safety issues around those trailers being parked in the front yard.
So for all intents and purposes, by passing this tonight, tomorrow somebody can put a trailer in their front yard, and nobody will say anything unless there's a complaint.
Through you, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. Well, this is a very interesting discussion tonight, and I think there was merit in this resolution coming forward. It doesn't look as though it's going to be successful tonight, and I think there's a clear message here. We partway through the discussion, we learned from staff that staff are quite opposed to this because of additional workload and because of safety issues and health and safety issues. And I think we've got to recognize the value of staff's time. I look at Mr. Hutchings, and anytime I'm driving past City Hall, his car's there. And, Mr. Moore's been working from home these last while, and I know he's always at the ready to respond to inquiries. And I think we owe it to our staff to, we've all made suggestions, and I think it's probably wise for us to allow the suggestions to go through the EOC and to heed staff's recommendations in these matters. This is a different time here. And, I look at the preparation time for this resolution, and it's probably 8 hours of staff time. And if I look at, what's going to go into item A, it's going to be probably another 40 or 50 hours of staff time. And I know each and every one of us would like to be able to do everything we can to help mitigate the exposure of folks that are out there on the front lines, to use a wartime metaphor. But I think there are some pretty darn compelling reasons not to do this tonight, namely those reiterated by the mayor earlier with respect to his fear that some child's going to be knocked off a bicycle and killed as a consequence of having trailers coming and going and reducing sight lines in front yards. We've also heard that there's a health concern as well, because the nature of RVs and travel trailers is that they store sewage waste on site. And I've never had one with a washroom in it, but I've got to think that they don't last forever. And residential driveways and front yards really aren't the places to be having septic trucks come and empty out trailers. So I think admirable as the intent is here and noble as the cause, I think we'd be offside in terms of approving this tonight. We've heard earlier as well that, you know, there is an opportunity for some folks to use their RVs on their own property in accordance with the bylaws that currently exist, keeping them back of the front of the face of the house or in the rear yard. And I've got to think for those that are able to do that, if they're listening tonight, just go ahead and do it within respect of the bylaw that we have now. But I really do think that we're on shaky ground to go ahead and do this tonight. And I would hope that, as I said, even though it was well-intentioned, I don't think we should be proceeding with this tonight.
All right, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to visualize in my mind the mechanics of using an RV or a camper in your driveway on your property, and the toilet gets filled up, and where do they empty it? The campgrounds are closed up. I don't believe there's any place in the city where you can unload a tank, sanitation tank. And I would hope, like heck, that people wouldn't run a line from the camper down to the storm sewer. So I don't know if staff can answer that. Where would they unload a full tank of human waste?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, that homeowner would have to make arrangements for that service to take place. I'm unaware of any other means that we would be, that would be available. The city is not responsible for that, so it would be up to the property owner to make those arrangements.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Right, up Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Paul or Brian or Heidi, I really don't know. The second last whereas makes mention of the County of Brant zoning bylaw. So essentially then, is this a two-step process where we temporarily suspend and then we ask the County of Brant in the recently annexed areas to concur with our decision, or are we just hoping that it's a one decision that needs to be made? How do the mechanics of that work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we don't have to go to the county. That references part of the lands that we brought in through the boundary adjustment are still zoned through the county zoning bylaw. So we need to, if we're going to do a temporary amendment, we have to amend both bylaws so that all of the city, all the lands within the city are exempt from that temporary bylaw.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I might be splitting hairs here, but I just want to be clear. We can make this decision tonight and it applies to the current zoning bylaws as organized and arranged by the County of Brant?
Through just for there, it's all of the lands within the municipality of Brantford, but part of those lands, so the annexed lands, so north of Powerline Road, those are still technically zoned under the county's bylaw, even though they're under our municipal jurisdiction. So that's why we have to do an amendment to both bylaws, okay, so that all of the lands within the municipal boundary would be subject to that temporary bylaw. So eventually, with development, the zoning as it relates to the county bylaw will go away as those lands are brought into the city's zoning bylaw.
Okay, and either way, it would only be a temporary application to the County Brant zoning bylaw, correct? Only as long as it's required?
That's correct, to both bylaws, yes.
Interesting. Thank you very much.
All right, before I go to Councillor, Toski to wrap up, I'd just like to say a few more words. And I think Councillor Carpenter hit the nail on the head. I mean, right now, there hasn't been a problem where people are reporting to us they'd like to use RVs and can't. And that's because we don't have by law enforcement officers prowling the streets to see if anybody's using RVs in their front yard. I mean, they're very much preoccupied with enforcing the emergency orders and declarations. Now, they are doing some minimal other by law enforcement, but, for now it's at a minimum. And I think, I agree with Councillor Carpenter's sentiment that there's an abundant amount of common sense in our community and understanding. And so you get a complaint, usually it comes from a neighbor. And I think that the reason why we probably haven't seen very many complaints is because people understand their neighbors. I realize that there are some that don't, but I think on the whole, we tend to be understanding of our neighbors, especially those that are first responders or they're other essential workers in other industries, truckers, grocery store clerks, and the neighbors know neighbors, and is a neighbor really going to complain because their neighbor is an essential worker? It needs to self-isolate to some degree, and they're pulling up the trailer. I doubt it, and I think that's because we haven't heard and seen a lot of that. So, but my concern is that through the wise use of our enforcement process and our bylaw enforcement officers, they don't have to enforce everything that comes across their desk. They exercise discretion in each situation, and they are great. They've done a great job of exercising discretion through this whole process. So, but my concern is that by passing this tonight, it almost creates a license to do it. And the only way you complain is it's a health and safety issue. You see the neighbor has an RV, and I'm kind of concerned that might end up creating more complaints to our bylaw enforcement officers, and they probably would have to give it some priority if it's a potential health and safety issue. So, but all that said, I fully appreciate what Councillor Antosky is trying to do. We've worked very hard at the EOC to arrange for alternate hotel accommodation through Laurier. But I acknowledge that no matter how you do it, either your employer is paying for it, or if you're lucky enough to have that, or you're paying for it yourself out of reduced rates. So it's a very difficult situation, and there's no easy, simple answer that fits every situation. But I have a lot of faith in the common sense of people that live in Brantford in this time of pandemic, making the right decisions about when they call city bylaw. Thank you. So I think, unless we have any other second speakers, I think most everybody's spoken a second time. I think that leaves you, Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say I'm a little bit shocked. And thanks for the appreciation of bringing this forward. We've said it a million times. These are extraordinary times. We've made lots of changes to the way we do things, and this is another one. And we're making our decision by trading off what could happen with what we know is currently happening. We know that people need to have these places now. I love the idea of the hotels. I love the idea of Laurier. Those are all great suggestions. They're not happening now. What do we do today for these people? What do we do today for our essential workers? We already allow 72 hours, so there's a liability acceptance there. That, these accidents can happen, and it's horrible to even think that an accident would happen. We've got less traffic out there. This is something to do now. We know that this is not going to last forever. None of us know how long it's going to last, and that's everybody's guess. But by not passing this today and hoping that people don't call on their neighbors, first of all, not everybody knows their neighbors. And second of all, we're now putting the onus, another stress on the essential worker that, well, hopefully nobody calls, but in the meantime, I'm going to do this and just hope I get away with it to protect my family, rather than, letting the neighbors know that this is okay for now until we come up with other solutions. It doesn't look like this is going to pass. I hope that people will change their minds. Of course, staff is not supporting this. That is their job. They're looking at this from a technical perspective. They're looking at it from the way the bylaw sits today, the legal ramifications. That is their job. Our job is to look at this as a different circumstance right now and to look at it from the perspective of our residents and the people and what they're living through, and not the piece of paper that dictates the rule. So I think that we need to show some flexibility here. I think that you know, even if we give them some sort of a document so that, or the registration process is great, but bylaw can make the decision as to whether this is health or safety, and that onus is on the resident, as we've heard from our solicitors. So, you know, and to say that we're taking our bylaw officers away from COVID-related work, this is COVID-related, what we're trying to do here. So I do not want to put more work on our bylaw officers. I had a email exchange with Gary today saying, how you doing? You guys must be really stressed. But I also think that this is a relative, or should be, in my mind, a relatively simple solution for a temporary measure. So I hope that you will think about this as we go into the vote, and that you will think that these are people that are dealing with these things now. This is not about what could happen, what might not happen. And I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Yeah, just a very respectful debate for a very difficult issue, the balancing of all the interests in this one. So, is there anybody else that wants to speak a second time? I don't think there was anybody else that. All right. So, Madam Clerk, if you would call the vote, please.
Certainly. So again, please raise your hand and keep raised until your name is called, starting with those in favor, please. Councillor Wall, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilburg. Thank you. Those opposed? Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, and Mayor Davis. Item 7.1, the temporary use bylaw to permit the use of recreational vehicles, has failed.
So we move then to item 7.2, which is the COVID-19 pandemic declaration of emergency extension. I'll start by reading the resolution within the item of 7.2 and then confirm the mover and seconder. And we have Deputy Fire Chief Anna Everett to comment on it as well. So the resolution is, whereas Section 4.1 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, RSO 1990, Chapter E9, the Act makes provision for the head of council to declare that an emergency exists in the municipality or part thereof, and also provides the head of council the authority to take such action or make such orders as he or she considers necessary and are not contrary to the law to implement the emergency response plan and respond to an emergency. And whereas in accordance with Article 8.1 of the Municipal Code, Chapter 511, Mayor Kevin Davis executed a declaration of emergency for the corporation of the City of Brantford on March 19th, 2020. Whereas Article 8.2 Municipal Code Chapter 511 makes provision that the state of emergency shall only be effective for 30 days from the date of declaration unless City Council authorizes an extension. And whereas 30 days from the date of the declaration would be April the 18th. And whereas given the extreme seriousness of this pandemic and information received from the Premier of Ontario, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the Medical Officer of Health, it's believed that 30 days will not be a sufficient time to remedy the state of emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the municipal declaration of emergency shall be extended until the head of council, in consultation with the City of Brantford's Emergency Operations Center, can resolve that the municipal declaration of emergency is no longer required in the City of Brantford. And I understand Councillor Weaver, you'll be moving this. Could you please confirm?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have a seconder for this? Councillor Antosky, thank you. So, Deputy Chief, before I throw it up for discussion, can you just give us a quick overview, please?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. As Mayor Davis discussed, he did execute the declaration of emergency on March the 19th, and under our current emergency response bylaw, that emergency declaration has a 30-day expiration. That 30-day expiration is actually April the 18th. We are 2 days away from that. The emergency shall only be effective for those 30 days unless council authorizes an extension. This is one of the reasons why we're meeting with you all today. Your Emergency Operations Center has been closely monitoring federal, provincial, and local communities' response to this COVID-19 pandemic. Since the province has decided to extend the state of emergency for an additional 28 days as of April the 11th, we recommend that we also extend the declaration of emergency. This extension of the declaration of emergency would be an extension until termination. I am happy to answer any questions.
All right, I might just add to that. So, operating under the emergency declaration, what does it do for us? And I think it does two things. One, it brings together a decision-making group called this Emergency Operations Center, where it's chaired by the Brian Hutchings, who is our CAO. You've seen him earlier this evening. I'm actually not on that committee. And so you have the Medical Office of Health, the Executive Director of the hospital, the Executive Director or the Senior Manager CEO of the county. We have Six Nations representation. We also have representation there from various general managers of city departments. Brantford Police Services, also represented from the OPP detachment in the county. I'm hoping I'm getting them all. A representative from the fire, emergency personnel. So it's a great group that meets every morning at, I think it's 9 o'clock every morning. And so I'm not there, but I hear what happens before and what happens after. I can say this, it's been a very effective group for managing issues that come up every day. And so it provides a mechanism for this group to come together and, using their group wisdom, make decisions that are important for our community. And they make recommendations to me, which I either accept or reject in terms of orders. So it's a great decision-making group, bringing together all these people in the community. And so it provides for this group thinking, if I can call it that, which is that determined commitment to do right by our community. And the other issue is that it allows for decisions to be made very quickly, because in an emergency, you have to make decisions, sometimes that day. And so to go through the council process, which I respect, and it's important to our society and our democracy, but in an emergency, you got to make decisions quickly. And so I think we've been fairly careful about those decisions, and if they definitely required or should have council decision-making, I certainly think you'll see that going forward much more. And since we're going to have a regular pattern of council meetings, that I think most of the really important decisions will actually come to council, and probably only those decisions that just can't wait. And hopefully there's fewer of those than there've been in the past would be made. So that's my comment about I'm not seeking power, believe me, but it does provide for some pretty effective, quick decision-making in an unusual situation. So Councillor Weaver and Celeste.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Between you and Deputy Chief, you've stole all of my thunder. Again, this is just something that we'll have to do every 30 days. So I'm happy to be the mover of this opportunity, but hopefully we don't have to do this too many more times, but I think that's going to be an ongoing thing for a little while until we can get this all sorted out. So just want to also echo a thank you to the EOC. The mayor has been giving us updates, members of council. You're doing a lot of great work. The amount of work you're doing is incredible as well. So on behalf of myself and all of Ward 1, thank you very much for the work you're doing. It's very important. And just to get a glimpse of what you're doing by the mayor with his updates that he's giving council every day, it really is amazing. So thank you very much.
Councillor Sluss.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The initial declaration was in effect for 30 days, and the extension that we're extending it now, and Councillor Weaver just indicated it was 30 days, but the resolution says it's in effect until it's no longer required. Is this an indefinite extension, or is it a 30-day extension?
No, it's indefinite. You're quite correct, Councillor Sluss. Perhaps Deputy Chief, did you want to make a comment on that, or Mr. Hutchings?
Sorry, yes, I did want to make a comment. It is our recommendation that we extend this emergency declaration by the city until termination, deciding through the head of council as well as the EOC. So we don't take up council's priority time every 30 days.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I would like to echo what Councillor Weaver just said. We get the updates every day, all members of council do, and there's extraordinary work being done by extraordinary people. And Councillor Weaver indicated that people in Ward 1 were appreciative of that effort. Well, certainly I think in Ward 2 they are as well, and I would presume right across the entire city, because we're being very well handled as a community. Everything, I think, in my opinion, is being done right. People can have confidence in what's going on, and I think everything that's happening in this city is reassuring people that we're doing the right things, everything is being done correctly, and I think the results are showing it. And it's not that it's over, we have to continue doing what we're doing, but what we're doing is the right thing. So I'd like to say thank you as well to the group.
Thank you. And just, yes, it is indefinite, and so it would end when the Emergency Operations Center, which again, I don't sit on that committee, that they would recommend that it end, and they would recommend that to me, and I'd make the order bringing it to an end. But it also does allow council, without notice, to end it on your own prerogative if you feel that somehow it's that power, which is very unusual, is somehow being abused. So, Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you, and I'll echo what both previous speakers said about our appreciation for the hard work of our staff. And I also will reiterate a comment that I made in the earlier discussion, that in recognition of the work that all these folks are doing, I think it's probably to our best effort if councillors can, to some extent, refrain from deluging senior members of staff with items of work that are not COVID related and are tertiary to our best efforts. Let's recognize what these folks are doing. I'm sure some of them are probably working 15 or 16 hours a day. And I think early on the mayor indicated that anything COVID should come through him to go to members of staff. And I think that's a practice that we should continue to heed into the future, recognize the value of the staff time and not be burdensome with them, for the next month or so at the very least.
Thank you, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add my recognition and thanks to you and CEO Hutchings and the whole team. Amazing job, and feel very proud as a councillor that you're leading our community right now. And the amount of work that's been done really shows up in our next item, 7.3, but I'll comment on that later. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you please call the vote on this item.
Thank you. So again, please raise your hand and keep it raised until your name is called, starting with those in favor, please. Councillor Wall, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilborg, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, and Mayor Davis. Thank you. Item 7.2, the COVID-19 pandemic declaration of an emergency extension is carried.
We'll now move to item 7.3. This is the title of this is COVID-19 EOC actions and operational impacts. And so I'll now read the recommendation, and after that confirm the mover and the seconder to get the item on floor for debate. So it is three parts. A, that report 2020 COVID-19 EOC actions and operational impacts be received, outlining the decisions that have been made by the EOC over the last 4 weeks. B, that the necessary COVID-19 declaration of authority bylaw, being a bylaw to delegate authority for decisions to the mayor and the chief administrative officer during the COVID-19 declared emergency, and attached report 2020-2019 as Appendix B, be presented to City Council for consideration. And C, that the chief administrative officer be directed to bring ongoing reports to council for review, detailing the decisions that have been made pursuant to the COVID-19 delegation of authority bylaw, and as well as at the Emergency Operations Center to date. So I understand, Councillor Sless, you're willing to move this?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And do we have a seconder for this? Councillor Weaver. So I will call upon Mr. Hutchings and Heidi to perhaps, as part of my speaking opportunity, if you could give us an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to just divide this report into basically two matters and then looking forward. And I guess our solicitor coined it today, the coming up for air reports. And you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. So the first matter, Mr. Mayor, this report outlines decisions and directions that have been made by the EOC since activation. You can see that in the Appendix A. The impact of these decisions on city operations and service delivery and mechanisms for communication on key decision items for COVID-19 emergency. As you know, Mr. Mayor, under the EMPCA under Section 4.1, you have the power to take such action at such orders that he or she considers necessary and not contrary to law to implement the emergency plan of the municipality to protect property and health and safety and welfare of the inhabitants of the emergency area. As well as under Chapter 511 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code, it allows an emergency operations group to start and provide coordination and organization that is necessary to support the incident site in order to minimize the effect of the emergency on the city, and is also responsible for ensuring continuation of municipal operations in the city during that time period. So between the EMCPA and as well as Chapter 511 of the Municipal Code, we've been making decisions on things, matters to close things down and to work through that. This is a very rare emergency. Most of them are 2 or 3 days, floods or what have you. This has gone on for now a month. We started this process on March 12th. Now going on a month, and looks like it's going to go on for some months longer. We want to make sure that we tighten up our decision-making process. We're not just relying on these two pieces. And so we're bringing forth a recommendation, you can see, I'll talk to in a second, about the bylaw, short-term bylaw. But I just also want to say that's our own internal group. This has been already referenced once or twice in this meeting just previously. In addition to our city group, which is made up of 28 directors and general managers, there actually is a regional group, an emergency operations group. For efficiency, the hospital didn't want to report to 2 or 3 emergency operations centers. We've now unified between the Brant County Health Units. The mayor mentions many of these. The Brant County Health System, the city, the county, 6 Nations, the OPP, Brantford Police Service, EMS, fire, both fire departments, both school boards, Enbridge Gas, and the 56th Regiment have all been involved, 13 agencies. This has been recognized as a provincial best practice. You'll see, I'll speak to this later. So that's the first thing. We want to make sure that people are aware of the decisions we made and very open and transparent. I know, Mr. Mayor, you've been communicating this to council, but I think this is a report that's now a public report, and they can see our appendices and chronology of all the things we've done and the decisions we've made. The second part, Mr. Mayor, is during emergency situations, it's important for people to move quickly and make effective decisions. Most of those decisions have been made, but there still may be some matters that may need time constraints, such as maybe quick things that came in from the province or funding for social services or what have you. But they need to have quick actions. And other municipalities, you've looked at other municipalities, bylaws they passed are very similar to this. They allow, during these extenuating circumstances, they allowed the mayor, the head of council, and the CEO to make decisions and provide delegated authority to make decisions within the parameters of the city's emergency management plan. That's very important to know. And then, so those are the two things I want to highlight, what we've done, what this bylaw does. But looking forward, I want to assure council, we've done communication to members of council, staff, as well as the public. The next thing is the mayor has done excellent communications to council. We've done also, my job is to communicate to our staff, and it's most importantly, make sure the health and safety of our staff is looked after, and that's on every single agenda. But moving forward, council, like on the 28th, we'll be doing this. Council will provide a report at every council meeting. We'll talk about provincial policy changes, operating decisions by the EOC, which really aren't council decisions, they may be minor things. The decisions that the mayor and myself might have to make because of timeframes, which we don't see as very many anymore. And last but not least, recommendations to council that don't have time constraints, such as service changes and any fiscal adjustments that need to be made. So every council will have a report with those four things: provincial policy changes, small operating decisions of the EOC, like you see in Appendix A, as well as decisions by the mayor and the CEO, and major items that we'll bring forward to council, make sure that affects the citizens of the city of Brantford. So in conclusion, I just want to thank council for their tremendous leadership in the response to COVID-19 pandemic. The mayor's leadership and ongoing communication to the public and the council has been a huge help for us, as well as the Unified Emergency Operations Center with 13 agencies. As I said, it's been a provincial best practice and has demonstrated the whole is greater than the sum of its parts in Brantford, Brant. Thank you.
Heidi, did you want to add anything to that?
Through your worship, Brian didn't leave a whole lot for me to add, except I will say, as I mentioned during agenda review, I would refer to this as a bit of a coming up for air bylaw. As Brian already mentioned, in an emergency situation, the head of council can act under the authority set out in the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. We do have Chapter 511 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code, but both of those delegations of authority are rather broad and not very specific. And so what we've done here is prepared a bylaw that provides specific authority to the CAO in certain instances, and then to the mayor and the CAO acting as a delegated body for emergency purposes only where the emergency is called by the head of council under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act for this COVID situation. And this will really provide the mayor and the CAO acting unanimously the opportunity to act quickly with respect to this particular emergency in the event that council is unable to meet. So again, we're meeting tonight. This is a wonderful technological feat. And I believe that it is the intent of both the mayor and the CAO to bring all these items to you as they can. But in the event that this illness spreads quickly, which we know it does, and we're unable to meet, we're unable to get quorum, this really provides a very clear authority to the mayor and the CAO to act together, and they have to agree on their actions. They have to report to the clerk on their actions. They will act by resolution, and they will have basically all the authority that council would have should council be sitting, but only in those events that they are not able to get to council in time. So again, there are some very strong conditions set out in this bylaw on which the mayor and the CAO acting as that body may act. And again, they can't act outside of the authority of council.
All right, thank you. So Councillor Utley, have you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. We've got 4 bullet points here. One is lessons learned. As we work through this pandemic, I would hope we're documenting the lessons that we learned that can be applied to, or what can be applied in the future years. Hopefully we'll never have another pandemic like this. The second bullet point is recommendations. What can we do to enforce and strengthen our bylaws and our processes moving forward? 3, successes. I hope that as we come through the other side of this, that we will recognize those who have gone above and beyond the call of duty, to recognize them and the successes that they've brought forward in this terrible pandemic. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Anybody else wish to speak to this resolution? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you would call the vote.
Certainly. So again, please raise your hand and keep raised until your name is called, starting with those in favor, please. Councillor Wall, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilborg, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, and Mayor Davis. So the COVID-19 EOC actions and operation impacts item 7.3 has carried.
Could you do that for me automatically? Don't rely on the mayor to be so proficient, please. So bylaws first and second reading. So I'll now read the resolution for the first and second reading of the bylaws, and that its lead be given to the mover and seconder to introduce the following bylaws first and second reading. 43-2020, a bylaw to amend Chapter 429 and Chapter 132 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code, building inspectors, property standards officers, coming out of the community development report that we dealt with earlier this evening. Bylaw 44-2020, bylaw to delegate authority to the mayor and the chief administrative officer during the emergency declared by the head of council pursuant to Section 4.1 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Bylaw 45-2020, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation, City of Brantford, with respect to the special meeting held on April the 16th, 2020. Councillor Martin, understand you'll be moving the motion for first and second?
That's affirmative.
Can I get a seconder, please? Second by Councillor Wall. Does anybody wish any of the bylaws to be separated for first and second reading? No hands raised. So I'll call the vote then on the, oh, sorry, Councillor Carpenter. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tried to raise my hand during the last question, but I guess I didn't get the button quick enough. But as chair of the John Noble Home, I've been providing regular update reports to the board members. Is there a way to connect with the Emergency Measures Committee and John Noble Home, who's taking the lead on long-term care facilities in the community and sharing such resources? Is that something that we could we click in there as well? And would all members of council appreciate a copy of my report, weekly report to about John Noble Home as chair of John Noble Home?
That's a great question. Mr. Hutchings?
Yes, why we haven't invited the long-term care facilities, because there's 15 between the retirement homes and long-term care, but it's new information to me, Councillor Carpenter, that there's a lead of them. I'm sure right now, as you watch the national news and the local news, Ontario news, long-term care and retirement homes are a major focus. And we spent at the Unified Committee a large amount of time speaking about them, the supports health unit and the hospital are giving. So if we could get a leader of that group of 15, that would definitely help us at the table.
Thank you. The leader now currently is the executive director. And I just wanted to highlight that John Noble Home restricted one person, one employer 3 weeks ago, well ahead of the provincial government making it law. And so I think we're leading the way, and we've got no outbreaks in any homes at the current point, and our executive director is leading. So I think we are leading by a good example here.
Yeah. So Councillor Carpenter, I apologize that we didn't catch you earlier. I'm not going to blame anybody else. It's my fault. But a little unusual. So, but if anybody else wants to comment on the bylaws for first, second reading, go right ahead. I think Councillor McCreary, you said you wanted to say something.
Mayor, yes, and since you allowed Councillor Carpenter considerable latitude, I'll just follow on that same topic. He's very modest, but I want to commend Councillor Carpenter for the leadership he's shown throughout the past year or so as chair of the John Noble Home Committee. And it's a lot of hard work, and he's really done well there. And I just want members of council to be aware, he didn't mention it, but the John Noble Home does have a pandemic plan, and it would involve segregating residents in the vacant wing. And I think it's a testament to the love demonstrated by the staff there that pretty much all of the younger staff have volunteered to work in the pandemic ward should that happen to us. So, we're blessed in this city, I think.
Yeah, I would second that, Councillor McCreary, because under Councillor Carpenter's leadership at the John Noble Home, and I sit on the board with him, certainly the John Noble Home, there is an association of those that are involved in that, the long-term care arrangements in our community. And the John Noble Home, the executive director there, Ms. Miller, has worked with that group to share best practices and certainly encouraged in many respects I've seen personally by Councillor Carpenter and Councillor Carpenter reaching out to other organizations in that association. So I quite agree with you that great leadership shown there, and it just the cooperation amongst those facilities is, just demonstrated right across the city. Yeah, determined commitment to do what's right for us and our most vulnerable. So, anybody else like to? A little unusual, but anybody else want to comment before I call the vote on first and second reading? Seeing none, I'll call the vote then on first and second reading.
Thank you. So again, just please raise your hand and keep your hand raised until your name is called, starting with those in favor, please. Councillor Wall, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilborg, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, and Mayor Davis. The bylaws, first and second reading, have carried.
I thought you were going to do that. So now we've done third reading. Just here in the council chambers, we have three of the clerk staff that are helping me tonight, and thank you very much. So third reading, I'll now read the resolution, the third and final reading of the bylaws, bylaw 43-2020, through to and including bylaw 45-2020, be taken as read a third time, be finally passed and signed by the mayor and clerk. Councillor Utley, I understand that you're going to move this motion. All right. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Weaver?
I do.
All right. So, moved by Councillor Utley, seconded by Councillor Weaver. Does anybody want any of the bylaws separated for discussion? Seeing no such request, Madam Clerk, if you'd call the vote, please.
Certainly, again, please raise your hand and keep raised until your name is called, starting with those in favor, please. Councillor Wall, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Weaver, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilborg, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, and Mayor Davis. The third reading of all the bylaws have carried.
I got it that time. So while I sign the bylaws, we'll go around the council chamber. Let's, if we could start with this week, Ward 1. So I'll call upon Councillor Weaver, then Councillor Vanderstel, and we'll just work our way through the various wards. If there's an announcement you want to make or something that you want to say to viewers.
Well, I have to be honest, there's not a whole lot of events happening in Ward 1 at this point in time. Really, everything's been on hold. We do still have some development that is going on. I was in a couple meetings today with some staff, so residents should be on the lookout for some information about some of those developments. And one in particular, I have asked to make sure that we do a ward meeting for, so that information will be forthcoming as well. And again, I just have to reiterate, Mr. Mayor, I think you're doing an excellent job. Our CAO also is doing an excellent job. I am very concerned about the two of you burning yourselves out, as many members of council have stated before. And I really just want to show my appreciation for our staff. It's just been excellent. This is, again, unprecedented, and what we've gone through and where we've been and what we've accomplished. I'm very proud, and I will also say I got a little choked up during the O Canada. I haven't heard that in 4 weeks since our last meeting, and just that music and that song just means something special today, I think. So thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to also commend the residents of Ward 1 and the other wards as well, obviously. We've had to make some major adjustments to how we function in community, in our neighborhoods, in our surrounding. I mean, a lot of people are working from home if they can, but it adds an awful lot of pressure. And I want to commend the overall change in behavior that's necessary in order to survive something like this. And I wanted to offer a little bit of hope as well. CTV News, they put out a regular broadcast of all of the provinces and how they're doing. And the way it stands right now, we're seeing the crest of the curve in Manitoba, BC, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador. So if you do check it out, you will see that what we're doing works. What's happening here and the laws that we pass here tonight, the spirit of those laws actually work. It has an effect on what's happening in your neighborhood, in your town, on your street. So again, I commend the behavior. I also commend the hard work, the dedication of staff. Thank you so much for this.
All right, Councillor, this will be Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors. I've missed you all, number one. I never thought I'd say that, but there we go. I would like to recognize one citizen. His name is Bob Hargreaves. Bob has taken it upon himself to take a 5-gallon pail with him around the streets, I think in the Shelfleet area, and he's picked up 10 5-gallon pails of litter so far. And other people have seen him do that. And they say, hey, we're going to do that in our neighborhood as well. So I want to thank you, Bob, for keeping our city clean. And you've got the ball rolling in. You're in Ward 3, the great Ward 3. And also want to echo my thoughts to you, Mr. Mayor, and staff. Absolutely proud as heck of the job you are doing, and feel very humbled working with everybody through this terrible crisis. So thank you all.
Thank you. Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you. Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Sless. Go for it. Your turn, Councillor Sless.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to say congratulations. It's not over, but we're in the middle of it. And for the job you're doing, for the job that our CAO is doing, I think the council itself can take a bow for getting a CAO of the caliber that we have that's leading this charge. We can feel very proud of the man that we hired, because he's doing way, way, way above and beyond what anybody should be expected to do. But he's doing that, and he's doing yeoman's work. So I think from that perspective, I'm pleased to be able to say congratulations to you both for your leadership. What I would say to the residents of Brantford, in particular Ward 2, but Brantford as a whole, you can feel very safe in your community. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing all the right things. You're listening to the experts, and you're doing what the experts are saying, and it's showing in the numbers. We're doing extremely well, but it's not a time to take your foot off the gas. It's time to carry on, and we'll beat this thing. So I guess finally, I would just like to say, take care, stay safe, and stay home.
Thank you. Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, I'm surprised you mix up Councillor Sless and I. It's usually Councillor Carpenter and I that you aren't able to keep separated. I just want to say that despite everything going on, we do have some business as usual carrying on here in the city of Brantford, and staff largely working from home are advancing things, as well as the two big construction projects that we have underway, the Marlene Ave transitional housing build, which hopefully will be ready next month, and the fire hall in beautiful Ward 3, which is going to be the gateway to the city from that fine exit off the 403. Both, as I understand, on time and on budget. As well, in the third ward, we've got a couple of things that are going to come up shortly. Greg and I have received the report back about all the traffic accidents on Fairview Drive, And it's a pretty horrendous record at the stretch between where the new fire hall is and say the Gretzky Center. So we want to have a look at maybe what we can do to alleviate some of those collision things that are happening all the time there. We're also taking a look at some traffic calming measures on Memorial Drive, which we'll be coming to later in the year. So there are things going on other than, you know, the emergency stuff that we've got here now. One thing we want to be careful of is that we don't develop complacency around the leveling of the numbers of folks that are sick across the country and in this community. You still can't act like idiots out there in public carrying on in groups. And I would like to particularly address trail users to show a little common sense. Bike riders, if you don't have a bell, maybe just announce you're coming up behind folks. And for God's sakes, don't walk the trails with earbuds in so you can't hear people coming behind you. And lastly, we sure got a lot of folks that are in our employee members of the City of Brantford team that are off on furlough now. Just want to say that we miss all you guys, and hopefully you'll be back sooner rather than later, and we can be back in full operation in the not too distant future.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, thank you. It's people are really appreciative of everybody who is working because they're all working at essential services. And one of the things that's showing up is blue ribbons on trees and whatnot along the boulevard. And I recently got a message, and it was from somebody who knows a nurse. And they said, well, they appreciate that, but if you have to go to a store and buy the ribbon, they'd rather you just stay home. Because if people stay home, we can get through this quicker. We can get back to normal, and we won't need to see the blue ribbons. I think these people know that we appreciate them. Many people have shown it in other ways, and just a simple thank you when you're getting your groceries to the person who's putting yourself at risk to make sure that you're able to do that. So just thank people when you have the chance to meet them. And other than that, do what you can to just stay home. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to thank all the people in the city. You know, I have my complaint level from constituents has never been so low. They realize what's a priority and what's not a priority. So what would have been minor complaints, people are saying, we know that council and city is busy, and they're not lodging those complaints. They're not lodging minor complaints anymore. But what I want to say to the residents is take care of the neighbors on your street. Everybody can take care of the neighbors on the street. So to the general public who's doing a great job, don't go to the grocery store with 3 people, you know, husband and wife. One person can go to the grocery store. My son goes to the grocery store for us, my wife and I, because my wife has underlying illness, and we can't risk getting the disease. We know we miss our grandchildren. We can see them. We can Skype to them. We can't hug them, of course, and that's difficult for us today. It's hard to even say. But take care of the neighbors on your street. You know you've got seniors on your street that are at risk and should not be going to the grocery store. So when my son goes, I check with the neighbors on my street. There's 5 of them that are senior, and they give me their list, and he picks those things up as well so that we can make sure that they're not out at risk. So the other thing, I've got a lot of people saying, how can I help out at the food bank? Well, donating food is not necessarily the best way to do that, because all food needs to be wiped off as well, because the disease can stay on products. So it needs to be wiped off. So the best way is to actually make a monthly contribution. And you can do that vis-a-vis your credit card. You can do it electronically from your bank account. Even if it's $10 or $20 a month, make a contribution directly to the food bank, and they can order that food to be delivered into them so they can get it out to people in the community. And anybody that's looking to volunteer to deliver food to people in the community, the food bank is a place to make that contact. The last thing I want to say is a thing to consider for the future is think about putting your own garden in. Put a garden in your backyard. We can't do community gardens because that's people collecting, and that's not safe. But doing gardening in your backyard for yourself is fine. And if you're going to share that, you want to make sure that the vegetables are washed out before you share it with anybody in your neighbors. Take care of the block that you live on. Everybody does that. Everybody will have somebody looking after. Everybody will have somebody looking after. Nobody will be isolated. There won't be any senior in isolation in their home that someone's forgotten about. Thank you, and thank you for everything everybody's doing.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that segue, Councillor Carpenter. So yes, the community gardens at this point in the province are under kind of the lockdown order, work order, and so Equal Ground Community Gardens will be looking to the residents to help us out, because we are still committed to get much needed food and healthy food into our community, which includes the food bank. We give quite a bit of fresh produce to the food bank. So if you've never had a garden before and you're afraid to do one and you want to try one, this is the time to do it. We will help. We'll be doing some online training and questions and answers. And if you want to visit the page, Equal Ground Community Gardens, you can see there how you can help out. We're working on Plan B and getting that out to the community within days. I also want to echo my thanks to senior staff and all our staff and the residents, not only for everyone's hard work and cooperation, but for everyone's innovation. This is a time that none of us have. There's no rule book. There's everything that comes down the pike. We're trying to figure out. We're getting some fairly broad strokes from the province, and we're trying to figure out what that means for our community. So I'm really grateful for the innovation, for the being able to turn on a dime and deal with each thing as it comes, and to the residents as well that are showing some flexibility as things change by the hour for us. So thank you on both sides of that coin for everyone.
Okay. Councillor Van Tilburg. Oh, not here. All right. Councillor Wall.
I don't know what's left to be said, but there are two things I'll point out. But I released a statement today thanking Mayor Davis and the CAO and city staff for all of the incredible work that you guys are doing under this unprecedented time. So I just want to echo what everyone else said about keep going. You know, we're all in this together, and I know that we're all fielding phone calls and emails and everything right now. And, you know, thank you to all the frontline workers, from people who are working in the grocery stores or fast food to hospitals and personal support workers, the truck drivers who are delivering everything. And I don't have kids, but a lot of my friends do. And there are so many parents right now who are suddenly teachers, and I have no idea how they're doing it. And kudos to each and every one of them for taking on a whole new responsibility. And I think the sentiment that I'm getting from the public is loud and clear, that teachers are completely underappreciated for everything that they do. And that, you know, I think every kid's going to be happy to go back to school once this is all said and done. But to every parent out there who suddenly found themselves a teacher, kudos to you and to the school board for working to get materials out to the parents so we can keep the next generation educated. And finally, I know the perception online is that there are a lot of people not following social distancing and going out for no reason, but it's not the case. The majority of the people in this community are taking this very seriously, and they are holding their families close. They are taking care of one another. They are taking care of their neighbors, and they are respecting the rules. And it is only a few people who are not. And I want to say a huge thank you to the public who are taking this seriously, because we are in this together, and only together will we be able to overcome this. And Canada and Ontario and Brantford is doing an incredible job of stopping the spread of COVID-19 in our community. So keep it up and stay positive. And I can't wait to see you all again soon.
All right. Well, I'll now bring to a close we're making history tonight, the very first virtual council meeting. The City of Brantford is now adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Limit it to just males.
Right.
So,
which is great.
Mm-hmm.
For wrapping up this segment, I want to ask you both, how are you training your athletes now? What is the predominant theory? What is the form that you're using? What are you guys doing in the weight room to make your athletes stronger and more conditioned for the football field?
So we've always tried to be evidence-based and research-informed, and some of the best research that's been out there for the last 40, 50 years is we try and train in a high-intensity fashion. We try and make our athletes approach momentary muscular failure if they're willing. Sometimes they're not willing, and that takes time because it's a skill they need to learn to be uncomfortable. But once they get the idea that less is more, then we're away and we're running, right? So everybody wants to do more sometimes, but if they could do a little less harder, they'll be much happier with the results.
So the belief is that as intensity goes up, the duration and the frequency have to be limited to get the best results.
Correct.
Perfect. On the next segment, we're going to have Christine and Jeff actually bring in a couple of athletes from the Western football team and show a practical demonstration of how hard these athletes work.
Hey everybody, Ben Strasser here. Think Millennial, 9 p.m. Thursday nights. Join us on Rogers TV and our Facebook page. See you then.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how bad's my rig?
10. We drilled to the bottom of the ocean, and we don't know what came out.
I can't believe you talked to all my people, say you gonna fight for me. If we can look at ourselves closely, we can change this world for the better. We all need mercy.
For Sir George Etienne Cartier, the work of uniting Canada was as vast as the country itself. First, he won over Quebec.
Union is the only way forward.
No, Monsieur Cartier. Confederation will cost French Canadians their nationality.
Monsieur, together we will form a political nationality independent of our origins.
Diversity will be Canada's strength.
Then he fought for Manitoba.
The Northwest has formed a government under Louis Riel. We will not join Confederation unless our rights are respected.
So you want a new province? Then you'll have it. There will be a place for your people in Canada.
He envisioned a country from Atlantic to Pacific.
British Columbia won't even think of joining Canada without a wagon road through the Rockies.
Ask for a railway. We are building a country, after all.
Bold as a lion, Confederation could not have happened but for him. Du Canada, son pays, ses amours.
Jeff and Christine are going to have their athletes work through a couple of exercises to show the cadence and the intensity that they expect when they're working out in the gym. They're going to start with this row motion. I'm going to hand it over to Jeff and Christine.
All right, we've got Mark on the pendulum three-way row. We're going to show you a couple things here. We're going to emphasize that this is going to develop his latissimus dorsi, his back muscles, but it's also going to help his trapezius because he's going to retract his scapula and pull through a full range of motion. All right, Mark, you ready?
Yep.
Away you go. All right, so we got a little bit of tempo. I'm gonna have Mark go back in like a 3 count. He's gonna pause, and then he's gonna explode up, right? And what I'm looking for there is I want him to have the neuromuscular intent to raise that weight as fast as he can. The whole idea is
Don't drop it, legs don't drop it.
time under tension. We're gonna try and recruit some maximum number of muscle fibers.
Put it.
Good. So we're gonna do 3 or 4 reps at each position. We're gonna have Mark switch to an overhand grip and continue the set. Nice.
Control.
Keep breathing, nice and slow. Explode up. Great job, Mark. Last one, we're coming up. We'll get you a